and welcome to another episode of Balls in Your Face Marketing. I have with me today a very interesting gentleman. He's an industry insider, somebody for me to talk shop with again. I'm looking forward to it. Adam Posner, ladies and gentlemen.
Shiny disco, 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 shiny disco ball.
Hey, thanks for having me on the show, man.
Man, it's great to have you. So we'll talk about your new podcast. We'll talk about your agency, NHPTalentGroup.com.
NHP, yep.
And the podcast, which is the Poz Cast. And but you've got an interesting story to tell. So let's start there, which is this. It's because I really like this. You reached out to me. We had an interesting chat. You struck me as this really sort of earnest, sincere guy who's hustling in the industry. But what was really interesting to me too was the background, the fact that you worked at Vayner Media. And what was interesting about that story to me was, and the way that you came across it was, with full contrition, with full acknowledgement that there's sort of a fallen from grace story to this. And the fact that I see you hustling, there's this sort of redemption to it, to me at least. But why don't we go back and talk about your experience at Vayner Media? I'm sure there's a lot of people, we got a lot of marketers who listen to our show. So tell us a bit about your experience there and what happened.
Yeah, man. Yeah, absolutely. And again, thanks for having me on. And it's interesting. Whenever I tell my story, it just continues to resonate, and it's my story. And I tell everybody, you gotta own your shit, you gotta own your successes, and you gotta own your mistakes, and you gotta own all of your flaws and recognize what your strengths are. And we'll dig into that in a second. So my story, real quick: born and raised in New York, is something I take a lot of pride in. Spent the first 15 years of my life working in advertising and marketing, worked client side at American Express, Sirius XM for about 5 years. When Howard Stern was coming on board, just a real awesome time. And then I went back to agency life for a little bit. And before I pivoted into recruiting, my last stop, I was group director over at Vayner Media, working with Gary and his team over there. And for me, that was the top of the mountain. That was a pinnacle. I reached it, right? That's where I wanted to be, the hottest shop, the hottest agency. Gary was really hitting his stride at that time. And I was just like, this is exactly where I want to be. First couple of months in were good. And then things started to take a turn. I had some things going on outside of my life that affected me, some personal things. And it got the best of me. And I'll be honest with you, I didn't bring my A game. And I knew it. I knew that I wasn't delivering. You felt it. There was conversations had, and it was going downhill fast. And then it was almost 4 years ago to this day, I lost my job. I got fired. And, it took me a while to say that. I would spin it around and put the optics on it like I left. I needed a career change. But that's the truth, man. I did not perform what they hired me for. And I think the agency takes some responsibility as far as setting me up for success. But I own all of it. I didn't bring my A game. I had a lot of shit going on. And it was at that moment, that day, that I got fired. And Gary did not do it. HR handled it. But Gary came into the room afterwards. We sat for about an hour talking about life and talking about what's next. And Gary's only a couple years older than me, so he could really relate. And he is genuinely, truly, the guy you see is who he is. He's all heart, and he means what he says, and he says what he means. And he sees me with my, head in my hands like this, on the verge of tears. And he's like, well, what's next for you? What are you going to do? What's on the horizon? I got to be honest with you. I had drinks a couple weeks ago with some buddies who do recruiting. And for years, they keep saying, Adam, you'd be awesome at recruiting. And Gary's eyes lit up and he's like, dude, that's crazy. He's like, let me tell you something. At this stage of your life, you need to stop focusing on the shit that you suck at and double down on your strengths. And I sat back and I let that digest for a minute. And he's like, well, what are your strengths? I said, what you and I are doing right now, networking, chatting, connecting. If you're in New York, schmoozing, whatever the hell you want to call it. I know the New York market inside and out. I know marketing and advertising. Gary said, dude, you fucking be great at it and go out there and do it. And with that, with his push out, with the wind at my sails, with Gary behind me, I ventured into the world of recruiting. And it wasn't without, due diligence and trepidation. It was scary, man. And I went and I talked to every recruiter I knew. I interviewed at a bunch of places, and I knew I couldn't be at one of those big shops where it was pick up the phone, dial all day, wear a suit. I was never a suit and tie guy. That was not for me. But, I did it, man. I jumped in, 35 years old, starting a new career it was humbling to say the least, man.
Yeah. 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 But you know what? Like, you know, I mean, first of all, I mean, I think Gary's advice is bang on, you know, double down on your strengths. I definitely, you know, it's not too late for anybody to change paths, pick up. If anything, it's easier now, right? Because here's the thing, because technology is moving so fast, everybody's kind of behind. Everybody has catching up to do. So the second that you double down and you focus on something and you bring yourself up to like, this is the current, this is today, I'm on top at 2019, I know what's going on. And then the other thing too, right, is that once you're there and you're right, then you want to stay there.
Exactly. And I think you hit a couple of interesting things there. You know, being at a social first agency and being 35 at the time, you know, the youngins, I like to call them the kids, probably get yelled at for saying that were working there, they're digital native, right? Social and everything there is second nature to them. I grew up with knowing that I had a beeper, I had my phone attached to a cord, I had a VCR. These kids don't know any of that shit. Right. Yeah. So they're closer to it. They know how to, you know, execute on Snapchat and Insta and whatever the hell else is coming out there. So I'm already behind the curve, and now I'm just the old man in the room. But that wasn't the point. And I think you kind of hit the nail on the head. Changing careers later on in life, you have all that experience behind you to help you be best prepared, and more importantly, how to be mentally prepared and adjust to it. Yeah.
Well, and I mean, these days, I think that it's life learning anyways. There is no, like, that whole original old school model of, you know, you go to high school, try to get good grades so you can get into a good university, pick a major, get your degree, you know, go into your career, and then that was it, and you were done your learning. You know, it was just on site learning and on job learning, and that was it, kind of thing. It doesn't fly in most industries right now, and it's going to be fewer and fewer as time goes on.
And it's a very topical conversation. You hear it out there, and even Gary's talking about it. But moving away from Gary, everyone's talking about, you know, the true value of a college degree. Now, I completely agree with it. Like in today's technology, with on life training, social training, everything that you're getting just in life experiences adds to it. But until companies change the requirements where you do not need a 4-year degree, I'm not saying every job, right? But the jobs that do require a 4-year degree right now, I don't see that changing for a long time, man. And I think that structured companies value the educational process. And I think it's not just what you're learning in college. I think it's also about the discipline and having some structure to your life as well.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. You know, it's so funny how, by the way, when you talk about that, you know, that sort of younger generation in comparison, you know, it's always funny to me because, you know, both, to me, all parties bring something to the game, right? Like, I mean, you know, there's certain things, you know, one in terms of design and style and language and all that stuff, you know, I think most people can be good at it, but it takes years and it takes experience. You know, there's something, you know, which is in our industry, which is important, which is taste, right? And that's something that gets developed over time.
Like a fine wine.
You know, and then the other thing too is, right, I mean, for as exciting as all of these new, you know, the new technologies and things that are emerging are, there are without a doubt marketing tried and true, you know, things that never change, right? Components of branding. And in fact, if anything, I would say that's probably almost the problem these days, is that there's so many metrics now that people can wrap their heads around, that they're almost pigeonholed on the metrics and have completely lost sight of long-term planning, branding. It's just for the immediate return. It's just thinking transactionally.
Yeah, absolutely. It's short-term gain versus long-term relationships. And I think that applies to overall recruiting and just relationships in general. For me, you know, my success has been predicated on playing the long game. Mm-hmm. And it really has contributed to everything, like, you know, calling on clients that I've worked with years ago, tapping into those connections. And the other piece is not burning bridges. And I think that's another point as well. You know, when I talk about getting let go, I mean, I have a very good relationship with Gary and some of the folks over there. And I don't think a lot of people who get fired from jobs have that. And I think it's important to have that kind of foresight. And listen, at the time, when you get let go, the last thing you want to do is, you know, have drinks with the person that fired you. That's not going to happen. But if you think about it a little bit in your mind about the long-term play and put things into context and start to change that mindset, just overall thinking about relationships not being short-sighted, not being transactional. It's not always, you know, what could you do for me? You know, maybe let me just give you 10 million things of value, and then in the near future or the late future, whenever it is, you know, it'll come back around.
Yeah, man, I've talked, and this is in part, what you were talking about earlier about being true to yourself and so forth. It's very funny how, when I launched my agency, I had no desire to be the sort of public face of it. It was going to be its own entity. I just wanted to kind of be in the background. But then I caught on to this economy of authenticity, the sort of phrase that you hear me say often. And there's nothing like, there's economies of anything, right? There's economies of precious metals, there's economies of scale, there's an economy in the coolness of shoes, right? But the point of that phrase and me saying is that because I think authenticity, maybe it's always been a currency, but it's a currency that has been appreciating in value of late.
And it matures, it grows too. I mean, not to say that some young folks coming out don't have authenticity, but I think that's something that has to do with your reputation and the voice and the sound you put out there, and just being true to yourself. And I think it ultimately goes back to, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on it, it's self-awareness. It's knowing who you are, but more importantly, knowing who you're not. Like, everyone's like, oh, you're putting out this podcast, were you trying to be like Gary Vee? I'm like, I am not him. I'm not trying. I am not a motivator. I'm not a motivational speaker. What I'm trying to do is inspire people with my story to show them how, like, one of my greatest strengths is my tenacity, right? And I'm open to saying that because that's what drives me forward. And I talk a lot about people that are in their career search, whether they're at a job or in a job that they don't like. The thing that you need to dig down and find inside to be successful in your career search is that tenacity. That's what's going to drive that career train forward. Yeah.
No, tenacity, grit, all of those things that are fundamental to what we value as in character of somebody. Absolutely. But I love that you said self-awareness. I mean, that's it. That's everything to me, because, here's the thing, because I've been starting to speak about this, and it's kind of complicated, and yet it's really super simple. And it's very much in line with what we're talking about here, which is this, is that I came up with this sort of formula for success that I have for success. And by the way, I treat this is almost synonymous with happiness, right? And it's not a destination, right? It's a sort of fluid thing, and you fall into it, and then maybe circumstances change and you fall out of it. But the formula is essentially this: success equals a state of optimally integrated being. In other words, when all of the aspects of your life, what you say, what you think, what you do, your work, your play, your family, etc., your community, when they are in alignment and serving a common purpose, then that begets better relationships, it begets success. And this is about the self-awareness now, right? A part of it, exactly that, is knowing what is that for you, knowing what your higher self is, or your super ego is, right? You've got your real conscious self, and then there's this higher person that you strive to be. The second you know what that is, and then everything that you try to do is at least aiming towards it, you're there. You have to know who you are.
I agree 1,000,000%. And I didn't hit that point until the last 2 years of my life, until hitting close to 40. And I think it's not just an age thing. I think it was just life circumstances, having my second kid, being, 3 or 4 years as a homeowner and living in this community that I'm in, changing careers, and all those pieces kind of coming together. And I think there's one add-on I would add to that. All those elements in this pyramid that you're forming up to the top, they all point in one direction, and they point to your North Star. That North Star is your reason for being, your reason for everything that you do. For me, my North Star are my 2 kids and my wife. What's your North Star?
Good question, right? So, I mean, for me, I don't take a one single thing like my kids, my family, which for sure, I mean, my kids are number one in my life. My family is exceptionally important. But exactly, I think for me exactly is that there is what I've found recently, and fairly recently too in my life, is how much I love to teach.
That's awesome.
Right? So really it's my purpose in life is to serve. And and it's funny how, again, like I've found a way. This is part of this line of thinking. Okay, is how integrated is what I'm doing, really, and taking a hard look at it. And but the thing is, here's the thing with the marketing. is that what we do, one of the ways that I started to look at it is that, our purpose is to facilitate communication and connections. And when I look at life itself, I mean, every living thing seeks to communicate.
To belong. Mm-hmm.
Everything, even single cellular organisms. I started is there anything that's alive that doesn't seek to communicate? And everything does. And we are the facilitators of that. And so I live in service of that, and I live in service of my fellow man to boost them up, to.
I love it. I absolutely love it. And it's interesting too, because it taps into another thing where, and it's really not to sound cliche. A lot of times when I talk to candidates, I don't ask them if they could have any superpower, what would it be? That's a cheesy question. But I ask them what their superpower is, because I think everybody inside has a superpower. And I knew my superpower years before I got into recruiting, because I saw it happen organically. My superpower is connecting. I'm a connector, and I'm a conduit. And it doesn't even have to be for recruiting. I'm talking about opportunities in life, opportunities to connect, friends who don't know each other, but I'm their mutual connection. And I know that these are two awesome human beings that need to come together and know each other. And that manifested into my career, where now I'm actually monetizing it. And it's not just the fact that I'm connecting people with great jobs. I think, going back to your point about a purpose, I finally feel at this stage of my life in my career that my purpose is to help people achieve their goals, and specifically in that job search area, help them get to that next level in their career that might be stagnant in their job, help them, get out of a job that they don't like, or help them with a career pivot, or even just give them free advice to help them go in the right direction. And for me, that element of giving was missing in my life. I was taking for a while. I was taking in different aspects. And once I changed that mindset and put it into practice, everything else opened. And it comes back to the self-awareness points you were hitting on before. 100%, my man.
Cool. So it must be useful though in a way to change careers and have that marketing background.
Yes,
right?
it's recruitment, as we like to call it.
That's cool. And it's interesting, to see here, because just before we got on here, you were saying that you're kind of going fairly heavy on LinkedIn these days. And it's really interesting because all of a sudden, I mean, I know I've seen Gary on LinkedIn forever, but he's clearly stepping up he's flat out like announcing, I'm all in on LinkedIn this year. It's interesting to me because I'm glad I went hard on it when I did.
100%. So here's my concern.
Sure.
And now I'm going to look at it from a little bit different perspective as a marketer, as a social marketer. We see the evolution of the social media sites from the AOL, from the Prodigy to the AOL to the MySpace to the Facebook to the Snap to the Insta and now to the LinkedIn. It's about attention and where the people are.
Right.
And I think there's a logical progression of eyeballs, is using a Garyism there, right, where the attention is. But here's my concern about LinkedIn. The core purpose of LinkedIn when it was built was to be a platform for professionals to connect. And there's a lot of purists out there that stick by it. There's a lot of the new wave people coming in saying that, content creators are content creators, but as long as you're adding value. And that's my true piece right there. I am seeing a 100 million, zillion, whatever % influx of content creators on LinkedIn that have amazing production quality. They tell a good story, but their value add is absolutely fucking shit. It's garbage. They're adding nothing. And I'm seeing a lot of people out there that are talking about things that are way over their head in their experience level, but it looks good on camera and it sounds good. I'm not calling anybody out on it, but it goes back to being authentic, right? And not just being on LinkedIn to get the views and get the eyeballs and monetize you as an influencer. Just because you have 1 million people on LinkedIn following you, that doesn't mean shit. It's a popularity contest. It's turning into a popularity contest just like the other platforms. It comes down to actually adding value and helping people learn something, to grow, to inspire them. Now, that's subjective, but so is my opinion.
Well, right. But actually I tend to agree with you that, I agree with you exactly of what it was originally, what its original intent is. And they seem still intent on ensuring that that's, that it is a professional platform for networking purposes. Yeah, I mean,
I'm a cynical New Yorker, man. You got to go with it.
No, but you know what? And like the same, but I agree that I really don't like, again, this goes back to what I was saying earlier about being transactional. It's not a transactional platform. Facebook, I do regard as a transactional platform.
I agree.
There, it's like you advertise, I'm there to sell you something. But I agree, it's a growth platform is what I often refer to it, or as another guest came on, Brandon Smits, and he kind of referred to it as the water cooler of the world.
That's a great analogy, but I would argue that there's definitely some transactional elements as well. I mean, I generate my business and I do my business on there, but I think you're kind of alluding to the fact that, like, I'm just using the example, the people that reach out and connect, and you're like, something looks a little weird about that. The second you hit the connect button, there comes the automated templated sales message.
Yeah.
Like, they're not learning your business, and then those sales messages are so irrelevant.
Right. Well, it's, you have to regard it as like a classic networking. Right. And this is the thing is, again, like, you're right. Like, some of the younger generation is like, maybe they haven't spent that time. Like, we used to go to conferences and we still do, but I mean, like,
face to face.
We used to go and it'd be face to face, and you wouldn't just be in there be like, hi, nice to meet you. I do this and I sell this. You wouldn't, right? You'd have a conversation. What do you do? Da, da, da. Oh, interesting. That's what, exactly, keep it real.
Yeah, and exactly. And that's one of the things I'm a big advocate as well too. Like, go to those LinkedIn local meetups, take the online offline. And that's exactly what you and I did. And I preach that consistently. Build that relationship online before you go in for the hard sell, right? Jab before you hook it, man.
Well, the other thing about it too is this, is as much as, for sure, so much of what I do is focused on the digital, but I'm under no illusions. And I will tell my clients this on a regular basis, there's degrees of separation, right? Like, so purely just online is cold. The second that I can talk to you over the phone, I'm a little closer because now I can hear your tonality. The second I can see you on camera, okay, I'm a little closer, I'm a little better because now I can see your facial expressions. I can start picking up on micro gestures and get a sense of a feel for who you are. Once I'm in person, once again, that much, because now I can touch you in the flesh and shake your hand. I can look you in the eye in the way that we can't here on camera unless
critical.
No, we can't, because we can't be done. So, and the quality of that, and there's so much evidence, and this goes back actually, by the way, to this, to the mindset stuff. I was never like, as much as I'm so not like, hokey, wishy-washy, magical, fluffy woo-foo, like self-help stuff. I was never, ever into it. But I was always into psychology. But the thing is that the science and the technology are merging, right? Like, even back when I was studying cognitive psychology in school years ago, computers were informing the field of cognitive psychology. And it's been going, and so we've learned so much. And especially about neuroplasticity and how much we can control the way we think. And again, this is part of, I think, when you say, hey, I'm just kind of come to realize this. I think that's in part because there's this sort of, I feel, and especially on LinkedIn, this sort of movement through the sort of zeitgeist of, hey, we got all the information in the world. We're not hurting for information, right? We're looking for meaning. And that's a fundamental thing that I've come to really know, like, about human nature, which is important for marketing and important for what you do, right? People are much less wealth seeking or success seeking or fame seeking or whatever. They're meaning seeking.
Do you think we're losing track of the fundamentals? We're losing sight of it just in this day and age of quick attention, 3 second, 5 seconds, tidbits, short attention spans, everyone's staring down at their phone all day. We're losing some of those skills and tactics that really truly build relationships. Do people even know how to freaking talk to each other anymore?
I think to an extent, yes, but I think it's just as, I think there will always be people like yourself, like myself, and so on, who are kind of, keeping an eye out on that. There's always that sense of that the older generation has, the younger generation. It's like, oh, they don't know this, they don't understand that. They talk back. There's some quote of Plato, I think, or some like ancient.
We're at that stage of life now. We are those old freaking men right now.
Curmudgeons, right?
Grumpy old men.
But but there's truth to that. But again, I think people will, I think in part it's because the technology is in its infancy. Like I really think what we're doing, almost on a subconscious level, is building the zeitgeist digitally, or the collective consciousness, and it's in its infancy. So I think we just saw this like huge infantile behavior. But and this goes back like at least a year ago, I think, when I wrote that article about like, can we get on with the sort of narcissism of our age, and look at me here, I'm in front of a Lamborghini, therefore I'm successful, like bullshit.
Totally.
And start looking for meaning, like,
That's
people are doing it.
It's interesting too, because I saw one of your post articles talking about authenticity. So how did someone, and we're talking about the age of the humble brag, like, and I love your opinion on that as well too, because there's an element of self-promote. See, I find it, I wouldn't call it a challenge. I think it's about maturity and understanding how to position yourself where you're showcasing your values and skills, because there's an element of showmanship and promotion. Because yes, I am trying to drive business and I'm trying to add value, but you have to be careful to not push over the line where you're overstepping the grounds of your experience. And I think that's a fine line that a lot of people, any age, it doesn't matter how old you are, struggle with.
Yeah. Oh, I think I'd be lying to say that I don't necessarily struggle with it and wonder, have I crossed the line here? Am I, is this too pushy? Is this too, do I come up, like nobody wants to come across as a used car salesman, right? Especially
in recruiting, man.
Well, yeah, I mean, anywhere. I guess unless you're a used car salesman. So
no offense to used car salesmen. I'm sure there's some great people out there that sell used cars.
Yeah.
Just to caveat that, he means no offense.
It's a cliche.
You're gonna lose at least half your listeners with that comment right there, man.
There we go. Well, fortunately, I have no used car sales clients at the moment. So, but you're right. I've just excluded a market right there. What do you do? Yeah, man. Like I think the line is actually it's not that complicated, and this is really very much in line with that post that you're referencing, which is just you be honest with that, what you're doing. And so I don't think I have a problem with the brag. What I have a problem is with the masked brag.
Completely agree.
Right. So in fact, it wasn't even so much the humble brag. Right. What was the word that I used was
bragitude?
No, self-congratulatitude.
Oh, I thought it was bragalicious.
No, it's self-congratulatitude, right? Where right, it's like I'm at my maximum LinkedIn posts. I just wanted to say thank you to all of you. I'm so grateful to all of you. No, you did that to brag. So just say, so what you really should be saying in that case is, I'm proud. Hey, everybody, I just want to say I'm really proud of this achievement.
It's an accomplishment.
Right? Thanks to everyone who reached. Thank you to everyone who thanked them. That's fine. But you know what I mean? Like, you see what the difference is, though.
It's positioning, and I think we see through that shit.
We see through it. That was the point of the post is like, if you're there's nothing wrong with being proud about something that you did. If you hit a milestone in your business and you want to tell people about it, that's business. You have every right. But don't.
It's the intention. It's the intention behind it.
Yeah, it's the look at the smoke and mirrors games that and people just don't buy it anymore. Like that slick packaged commercial that tries to sell you something. And this is why LinkedIn is growing, as far as I'm concerned, and why it will continue to grow. And I have a post at least about a year ago saying you're about to lose your job.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't really for everybody, but the reality is that we are moving towards a gig economy. As a result, more of those people are going to be going onto LinkedIn to network to figure out what's going on. But
they need to find their business. Absolutely.
Right. And in that gig economy, it's like this village economy. Now we're helping each other. We can buy, so there's all of a sudden that now like relationships matter, and your integrity and your reputation and all those things matter as an individual, even more so than ever before, especially if careers and jobs are fragile. And then the thing is that I've said a lot, like, it's not like our grandparents' generation. You and I are roughly the same, right? So, where they would retire from university, they graduate from university, work and retire at the same company their entire lives.
20 years, yeah. My parents were New York City Board of Ed teachers for 30 years. Same job. It's a different, and listen, there's plenty of teachers. I mean, we're talking more about different professions, but people don't stay in jobs longer than a couple of years. And it's acceptable. And that's another thing in recruiting too, where we're trained as recruiters to look at people who change jobs as job hoppers. But I look at it too, you have to evaluate each individual story and understand what their motivation was to leave that job. And that really speaks to their integrity and their character and what their real desire is in life. And maybe they're just not finding it, and that's okay.
Well, yeah, I mean, yeah, exactly. I mean, the point that I was getting at there before too was exactly that the loyalties, that social contract is broken apart, right? So you don't have companies loyal to their consumers and customers and customers and employees loyal to those businesses anymore. So what sells them? Real people, right?
And it works the other way too, where companies are not loyal to their employees. Yeah,
no, exactly. That whole social contract has broken down. And so what that means is that actually opens up a room for that gig economy to actually be very competitive with those big businesses, because now, we can, like, here's the thing, like, why have microbreweries exploded over the last few years? In large part, it's that I'm not going to be loyal to the big brand, where their whole business model is about raising the value of the shares, when I can now go onto YouTube and watch a guy who's the brewmaster himself convey his conviction and his passion for it. That's what creates the new, like, because we're going back to what I said before. We seek that connection. We seek those loyalties. We'd much rather be loyal to something like that.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And it applies to everything. And it's the information age where everything is at your fingertips, and we're much smarter consumers. And those big old staunchy brands that still believe that they're pushing their messaging first are the ones that are going to, and we're seeing them fall daily. We see them fall to the pieces. I mean, look at Toys R Us. Toys R Us thought they were cool back in the day, and they put their product on Amazon to sell it, to distribute it. We all know what happened there.
Yeah. No, I mean, anyway, I wonder sometimes, like, I mean, do you ever get the feeling sometimes that it's like, okay, well, what are we going to do when the world there's like 4 companies? It's like Google, Amazon, Facebook, and, right? Like, and everybody, they just, everybody just either works for them, right? Or I don't know where it's going. But.
It's scary. We moving into that, but then you're talking about, like, there's still those niche markets, right? I mean, listen, there's not going to be a niche social media platform. That's not the way that works. But as far as the big boys, right, is it going to just be, those big 4? What about IBM? What happened to IBM? What happened to the car companies, right? Like, where?
Yeah. Who knows? You never know. Watson could come in from behind.
Don't doubt Watson. Watson's a sleeper, man. He powers a lot of shit.
Watson is a sleeper. I know.
I met Watson once. I met the Watson.
You met the Watson, yeah?
Yeah, I was at IBM, and I said, "Can I meet the Watson?" And they opened up the door, and it was this bright light, so I really couldn't make out what the Watson was. I started asking the Watson questions, and the Watson goes, "Don't ask questions that you don't want the answers to." And I just shut the door and walked out. I'm like, all right, I met Watson. I could chalk it up on my bucket list, and I'm good.
I don't know what part of the story there to believe and not believe, but I like it anyways.
Yeah, that's just a little New York bullshit for you. There you go.
Yeah, I like the style. I always love it. Every time I go to New York, man, I feel so at home.
It's a welcoming place. It's a welcoming city.
I mean, it's funny because, like, we Canadians, everybody thinks we're always so polite. But then I get down there and I'm like, fuck you. Fuck you.
Fuck you, buddy. Fuck you.
Yeah.
Literally, it's like the South Park character. It's like Terrence and Phillip. You just take it right to the streets there. And I think New York, I mean, listen, New York, it keeps you real. It keeps you honest. It's a tough place. It's really true. The cliche, it'll spit you up and, they'll chew you up and spit you out. It's really true. It's cutthroat, but there's so much reward to it where, the people smile, and, like, there's a reason celebrities live here, because they can walk down the street and no one's going to fuck with them. Right. Like, it's just a different place. And it also motivates you because you see everyone else busting their freaking ass out there. You see everyone else grinding and hustling and doing what they got to do. And it's like, I got to keep up with that or I'm going to fall behind.
Yeah, I think Toronto's kind of like that.
Cool.
Toronto's got a real, like, it's a, nose to the grindstone kind of city and stuff like that. But yeah, man, I remember some friends of mine went down to New York and they got stuck in a snowstorm, and there were like no buses like coming out of Grand Central Station, and my friend's waiting there to, get another ticket, and this guy's standing there and he's talking to the ticket here, and he's like, I gotta get to Boston right now. And he's like, sir, I'm sorry, there's no buses going to Boston. And he's like, you don't understand, I gotta get to Boston like right now. He's like, sir, the answer to your problems do not lie here. I'm sorry. He's like, you know what my problem is? You're an asshole! You're an asshole! I was just like, I love it.
I saw a lady yesterday morning in the city trying to get down an escalator that was blocked off by the guys working on it. There was literally a freaking rope in front of it, and she's trying to get around, and the construction guy's like, what are you doing? The escalator's broken. She's like, I need to get down there. How else am I going to get there? He's like, you're going to walk down the stairs? He's like, I don't give a shit. I need to get down. He's like, the stairs are around the corner, lady. Your feet aren't broken. Just go for it. Like, that is a New York attitude. Like, I don't give a shit if something's broken.
Yeah.
I'm going to use it. They don't really care. It was mind-boggling.
Yeah. I hear, man,
That's a true story. That actually happened yesterday morning.
Oh, I bet you it's happening every day in the streets of New York, city that never sleeps. Love it, man. It's great stuff. So where can people find you?
Yeah, absolutely. You can find me on LinkedIn, Adam J. Posner. Please follow the Poz Cast. It's my new podcast coming out. And I put this podcast together to really help those that are in the career journey, that are looking for actionable advice, tangible advice to help drive their career forward. Ultimately, I'm really trying to help people find that inner tenacity so they could actually drive their career forward. You can subscribe on all the major channels. You can find me at www.nhptalentgroup.com and reach out to me on LinkedIn. Always looking forward to connecting with new people.
Awesome. Where do you broadcast the podcast? It's on iTunes.
The podcast is on all the major platforms. It's anchored on the Anchor. It's anchored on the Anchor. You could find me on Spotify. You could find me on the iTunes as well.
On the iTunes. Awesome, man. Thanks for coming on. It's been fun talking shop with you.
Julian, you're the man. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it, man.